Picture a small, high-end boutique store tucked away in a quiet corner of Paris. When you walk in, the shopkeeper greets you by name, remembers that you prefer a specific type of roast coffee, and treats you with genuine respect. It feels personal, warm, and professional. Now, imagine if that same shopkeeper secretly started recording your private conversations, followed you home to see where you live, and sold a detailed list of your daily habits to every other shop in the city without ever asking for your permission. That sudden sinking feeling of being violated, that is exactly why we need data protection. In professional terms, privacy is the right of an individual to exercise control over how their personal information is collected, used, and shared. To put it simply, it is the digital equivalent of knocking before you enter. It is the fundamental idea that just because technology makes it easy to collect information, that doesn't mean it is right to do so. In our modern interconnected world, your data is your digital identity, and protecting it is not just a legal checkbox. It is a moral imperative about maintaining human dignity in a tech-driven landscape. So, now that we have mastered the core concept that privacy is about personal control, you might be wondering how we actually moved from simple local courtesy to the kind of strict binding laws that govern the entire world. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is the history and evolution of European privacy. Think about how European society was forced to change after the massive, world-altering conflicts of the 20th century. People realized that when governments, intelligence agencies, and large organizations have total unchecked control over personal data, the consequences for individual liberty are absolutely devastating. This is why Europe decided to build a privacy shield for its citizens. They drafted the European Convention on Human Rights, which formally stated that every single person has a right to respect for their private and family life. In simple words, Europe decided that privacy is a basic, non-negotiable human right, just like the freedom of speech or the right to a fair trial. I remember an old mentor of mine explaining that while other parts of the world might treat personal data as just another commodity, like oil or gold, to be bought, sold, and traded for profit, Europe treats data as a direct reflection of the person. This philosophical shift is why we have such robust protections today. You have probably seen the effects of this at the office, where companies now scramble to get explicit, documented consent before sending you a single marketing email. This isn't just unnecessary bureaucracy. It is a direct result of decades of realizing that the individual must be protected from the massive, overwhelming power of institutions. So, now that we've mastered the idea that privacy is a protected human right, you might be wondering how those high-level rights actually turn into the specific, complex rules we follow in our daily work. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is the birth of the GDPR. In 2018, the General Data Protection Regulation, commonly known as the GDPR, changed the entire world. The book definition says it is a comprehensive legal framework designed to harmonize data privacy laws across Europe and protect the data rights of all EU citizens. Simply put, it is the rulebook of the internet. Before the GDPR, every country had its own messy, inconsistent rules. It was like trying to play a high-stakes board game where every player was secretly following a different set of instructions, leading to chaos. The GDPR forced everyone to play by the same clear and fair rules. Imagine you are working for a major e-commerce giant based in Berlin. Before the GDPR, you might have been able to hoard customer data for years just in case you needed it later, without any clear justification. Now, if you keep data you don't actually need for a specific stated purpose, you are breaking the law. It completely shifted the power dynamic from the company back to the customer. It brought us powerful concepts like the right to be forgotten, where any individual can demand a company delete their records entirely. Stay with me here. This was the historic moment when privacy stopped being a nice-to-have corporate feature and became a must-have requirement for every serious professional. So, now that we've mastered why the GDPR changed the landscape, you might be wondering who is actually responsible for all this sensitive data. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is defining the roles of data controllers and processors. Every single privacy audit boils down to understanding two main characters, the data controller and the data processor. The controller is defined as the entity that determines the purposes and means of processing personal data. The processor is the entity that processes the data on behalf of the controller. Let's make this simple. If you are the manager of a luxury hotel in Rome, you are the controller because you decide to collect your guests' names, room preferences, and credit card details to run your business. The IT firm that hosts your guest database is the processor. They are essentially the plumber moving and storing the data for you. You have probably seen this at the office where a third-party software provider asks you for data to run a payroll app. You are the controller and they are the processor. This relationship is absolutely critical because if a data breach happens, the law clearly assigns the blame based on these roles. If you don't know which one you are, you won't know your specific legal obligations, and that is a recipe for disaster. So, now that we have mastered the difference between the one who decides and the one who acts, you might be wondering what specific principles guide their behavior. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is the principles of data protection. The GDPR is built on 7 golden principles, but let's focus on the absolute heart of them: purpose limitation and data minimization. Purpose limitation means you can only use data for the specific defined reason you collected it. Data minimization means you should only collect the absolute bare minimum amount of data needed to get the job done. Imagine a fitness app in Madrid that asks for your heart rate and daily steps. That is necessary for the app to function. If that same app suddenly asks for your home address, your political affiliation, and your family's medical history, that is a clear violation of these principles. You don't need a sledgehammer to crack a nut, and you don't need a customer's entire life story just to sell them a gym membership. In the workplace, this is the most common point of failure. We love to collect just-in-case data because we think it might be useful later. But as a privacy professional, your job is to be the voice of reason that asks, do we really truly need this? If the answer is no, delete it or don't collect it. So, now that we've mastered the art of less is more in data collection, you might be wondering what happens when we inevitably have to handle even more sensitive information. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is the special protections for sensitive data. To wrap up this introductory journey, remember that being a privacy professional isn't about being a quote policy police officer who says no to everything to make life difficult. It is about being a bridge builder. You are the person who enables the business to innovate and grow while keeping the hard-earned trust of the customers. Think of it like a safety inspector at a grand historic bridge in London. You aren't there to stop the traffic. You are there to ensure the bridge can carry the weight without collapsing. When you look at a new marketing campaign or a new AI tool, don't just see the shiny features. See the data flowing underneath. Ask, is this fair? Is this transparent? Is this safe? Your role is to balance the company's need for growth with the individual's right to dignity. You have now moved from the theory of rights and laws to the practical, daily task of proving that you can respect personal data. You are the architect of digital trust.